Hello, everybody. This is Kareem. Just to let you know that in our discussion now with Elijah Magnier that we have about Lebanon and what's going on with Iran and Lebanon with the Israeli attacks and invasion, we have him on. We talk for about 10 minutes or so. Then Elijah has to go to do other interviews. Then he comes back in. So there might be some kind of interruption in the recording. So just so that you know that this is what's happened. So I hope you enjoy the show and everybody, especially those that are in the region, are safe in these moments. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Makdis History podcast. I'm Kareem, and I'm joined, of course, with my brothers Sari and Osama. Today, in light of what's going on, we're going to be focusing on the Israeli carnage, the Israeli war, the Israeli invasion on Lebanon, its pummeling of Beirut, and talk not just about this, but about really larger strategic issues, tactical issues, the larger role that Iran is playing in this war, and potential regional implications of this war that's taking place now. And with that, we're very happy to welcome Elijah Magnier, who is a veteran war zone correspondent and a political analyst with more than 35 years of experience covering the entire region of Middle East and North Africa. He really specializes in real-time reporting, both strategic and military, and we want to focus, as I said, on the strategic and military side of the war today. He covered a lot of different wars over these last 35 years, including the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the 2006 war in Lebanon, but also the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s, the Lebanese Civil War, the Gulf War, the Iraq Gulf War of 1991, and even in the former Yugoslavia war during the 1990s. He's also been able to cover some of the recent wars in the region, from Libya to Syria and other wars. So he tracks especially the military and strategic side, and we're going to focus in this episode on this, and we welcome. So thank you very much, Elijah, for joining us.
Elijah, welcome to the podcast. And since we only have a few minutes with you, maybe we can start by asking you to give us a quick assessment of where you think things stand now in Israel's attack on Lebanon, and perhaps, if you have time, the threat of wider escalation involving Iran as well.
Thank you for having me. I don't think we are at the stage of an all out war yet because we have an issue with different players. So Iran doesn't want an all out war. Benjamin Netanyahu would like to wait for the presidential election on November the 5th to see if he wants to go toward an all out war if he has a president like Donald Trump, who complains about the size of Israel, that too small, and then who, when he was no longer elected, complained about Netanyahu not being courageous enough to start attacking Iran. Therefore, the intention is there. And what Benjamin Netanyahu can do is also, he has all the readiness, particularly after inflicting heavy damage on Hezbollah. So, where we are at today, funny to say that, but those fighters in the south of Lebanon, south of the Litani River, and later on north of the Litani River, are the ones who are going to decide in which direction the Middle East is going to go.
But Elijah, if I may, so clearly it's clear that the fighting on the ground in the south of Lebanon, the Israelis are unable to make 100 or 200 meters gained, clearly because they keep getting thrown out with heavy losses. But in the meantime, the Israelis are bombing the daylights out of southern Beirut, out of much of the south, other parts of the country. I saw a report today. They're doing kind of what they did in Gaza, or what they're doing in Gaza. They're bombing hospitals and medical teams and ambulances. Clearly, their program in Lebanon it's another version of a kind of genocidal attack. In this case, on specifically the Shia community in Lebanon, to destroy it, take away its houses, its homes, its medical infrastructure, its support systems, and so forth. Obviously, not just Hezbollah, as is always misreported in the mainstream press. So, how do you think in this balance between the on the ground fighting, where Hezbollah seems to be able to easily hold its own against the Israeli army, as opposed to this incredibly heavy bombardment? How do you find the balance, playing out?
Two things. I'm going to start with the last part. Yes, Israel is transforming Lebanon into another Gaza, using 85 tons of explosive against one single target, and then today using 77 or whatever quantity of explosive to destroy 5 buildings. So what the Israelis are doing is to copy paste what they've done in Gaza, and now they're going to go toward. Oh, we know there is a location of Hezbollah in this building, and then they will bring down 2 or 3 buildings to make the price extremely heavy on Hezbollah in the reconstruction in the future, and on the Shia community who are internally displaced and then faced with no homes, destroying homes that are going to require at least 2 to 3 years to be reconstructed. And they will move toward the schools, and they will move toward the mosque, and they say there are shelters under the mosque and under the school, and they will do exactly what they've done in Gaza. Nothing new. It's a deja vu. Nevertheless, I am not as optimistic as you about the first part. Yes, you've stated facts, and I've been in the 2006 in the war, and I've been in the south of Lebanon and in Beirut, and I understand what you're saying in making the comparison. Nevertheless, the Israelis have gathered 4 divisions. We're talking about approximately 80 to 100,000 men, and the special forces are the one engaged in the battle now to allow the tanks and the mechanic divisions and units to break in. They will not push them because Hezbollah is waiting with the laser anti-guided missile to laser anti-tank missile, sorry, to hit the Israelis, and they can hit them in a range much longer than the one of the Merkava tank. Nevertheless, we're still talking about non-state actor against an actor, and both are very determined to achieve their objectives. And the Israelis are looking for the weakest point to break in. And what they want to do is they want to go through the Galilee and come down on the Litani River, isolate the south of the Litani River, where there are 2 units of Hezbollah, and we're talking about Nasr and Aziz, and then move toward the north of the Litani River, where there is another special forces of Hezbollah unit, and that is Badr. If they manage to surround these 2 first units south of the Litani River, this is all what they want to do, is to cut the line and then start bombing the hell out of the south of Lebanon. Now, it is true that the topography in Lebanon is completely different from the one in Gaza. There is no comparison. The experience of Hezbollah in urban warfare in their area, they know every tree, they know every single street more than the Israelis, and they're motivated by the multiple assassination of their leader and their commanders, and what the Israelis are doing. And they know they are the last straw in front of the Israeli plans. And they're going to defend it like hell. But we should not count on the first days or the first week. We should count on what's going to happen next, and if the Israelis are going to be able to remain in these positions or not. We've seen signs that the units in the south of Lebanon, they don't need the Secretary General to command them. They have their commanders, they have their weapons, they have their ammunition, and they have their instructions, and they know what to do. They don't need anybody else. The problem that we have seen is there is no longer an equation of a building in Dahi in exchange of a building in Tel Aviv. That is gone because it shows that the Israelis have destroyed large capability of the missile units. But that is another topic that I don't think this is the right time to talk about it, and why these failures took place and how they managed to discover the location of all these commanders, and how Hezbollah managed only in the last 48 hours to find out, or even better, 24 hours to find out what was the problem. And we're not talking about human intelligence, we're talking about something completely different that Hezbollah seemingly was not aware of. Nevertheless, we have Hezbollah that capable of manufacturing rockets and missiles. We have Syria that is part of the support. that is offering, manufacturing many missiles. We have seen the missiles Fadi 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are frog missiles that have been developed and manufactured in Syria with the Iranian capability, additional GPS, and they have been updated to be more precision missiles that Hezbollah can use. When you see the Burkan, these have a very short range. They are used by the units that are there. So there is a kind of independency of these three units that are operating against Israel, and they will stop fighting only when they are all dead. Therefore, this is what the Israelis are facing. And we've seen also how the Palestinian resistance, that has much less effectives, did not raise the white flag. I don't think the Lebanese are going to do this, to do so, and I think they will not raise the white flag.
So, two questions, Elijah, if we may. One is, have you ever seen in modern warfare this kind of approach by Israel, that what Israel is doing, in other words, targeting, deliberately going after hospitals and schools, constantly attacking hospitals and schools to make the price extraordinarily high? Have we ever seen this before in modern warfare? And the second question is, are you saying that the intelligence that you have, or the information that you have, is that Israel has in fact destroyed Hezbollah's long-range missile capacity?
First of all, this is an unprecedented. We have never seen something similar of what the Israelis are doing. And they claim to have purity in arms. They have moral. In fact, they are the most immoral, unethical army in the world in their behavior, because they managed to kill many civilians, and they looks like real expert in killing civilians. I don't think anyone has the expertise of the Israeli occupation forces in destroying infrastructure, killing civilians, destroying schools, hospitals, mosque, church, going after civilians in tents only with an excuse of there are operative of the Palestinian resistance, only to put pressure on the resistance to during the negotiation. This is very immoral, unethical, violating all international laws. The problem is there is no accountability. And this is why Israel is pushing the boundaries that we have never seen. Will continue doing the same in Lebanon. When Israel heard the Americans in Gaza saying that the Americans are concerned, and the European Union and countries are even more concerned, but nobody is doing anything. And concerns never save the life of civilians. That Joe Biden himself came out and said there are too many civilians killed, and at least 30,000 at that time. Now there are more than 42,000 killed. So, no, we have never seen. Apart from having information, there are signs and signals. You see that Hezbollah is not using the missiles against Tel Aviv as it used to be in the past. Therefore, there is something that is not quite fitting with what Hezbollah said it will do, because Israel carried out more than 3,500 attack on all the locations, and therefore perhaps managed to destroy a large part of the capability. Nevertheless, Hezbollah is counting on the Israeli to move in, because once the Israeli forces are close to the Hezbollah special forces, then the air force is no longer applicable. So they have to withdraw, and Hezbollah knows how they can hide. And there are going to be many people killed among the Lebanese resistance, and many among the invaders, Israeli. But it doesn't mean the war is over. It just started. We cannot build on information we have only in the first days of the invasion.
Elijah, hi. Just a quick follow up here. So I mean, just based on this last point that you mentioned, the question of whether Hezbollah still has these longer range, strategic weapons that they could hit Tel Aviv and others. Are you suggesting? Are you? I mean, are we assuming that they're gone, or could they be still being held back for strategic reasons that they feel like this is still not the moment, despite everything, it's still not the moment to use them. That's the first. The second question is really sorry. That's just a quick. So the question of Iran, I might have missed it earlier, but the question about Iran, is there what the relationship with Hezbollah, not the big relationship, but the relationship, the military, let's say, relationship. What is Iran in now in this kind of difficult position? Will it allow Hezbollah to be defeated if this is the case, even if it takes a long time in the south? But effectively, that there will be this kind of defeat, and we're getting to the end game.
Now, for the first one, there are no more red lines. Everything is off the table now. Any side that has missiles to hit any target anywhere will use it. Nevertheless, the line between Iran and Lebanon has not been disrupted. Therefore, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that has been defeated. Uh, And secondly is Iran has an organic relationship with Hezbollah. Listen to what Sayyid Ali Khamenei said today. We will support the resistance. Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, came to Lebanon today in the midst of a war when the Iran air is no longer allowed to land in Lebanon and was threatened by the Israelis. It is much deeper than that. The Iranian general Haj Abbas that was killed was the head of the Operation Arub inside the RIGC in Iran, and he replaced Haj Mohsen Fuad Shukr to conduct the operation. Iran will not give up on Hezbollah because in this case, they will be next.
So, Sadi, that was and Karim, that was a bit of a realist perspective on the military situation. So, what I understood Elijah to be saying is that essentially, he's not optimistic about the prospects for Hezbollah in the south. That they're going to be, if I understood what he was saying, they're going to inevitably be overwhelmed by the Israelis, given the fact that they've mobilized an entire army and that the Israelis are determined to destroy Hezbollah. So, Sadi, where does that leave the kind of analysis that we've been hearing all along?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't have any more information than anybody else has, but it seems to me, based on historical precedent, there's two major factors. First of all, the Israelis attacked Lebanon in 2006 with very, very strong forces too. It wasn't. It was also about the same number of troops, if I remember correctly. It was a massive assault on southern Lebanon. And as we know from in the 2006 war, they were unable to make much progress, and in the end, they had to give up and they lost the war, despite the damage they inflicted. This time, they're inflicting much, much, much more damage on civilian infrastructures, housing, and so on and so on. I think they've killed more than 2,000 people in the first week of this attack, compared to I think 1,300 civilians or so in all of 2006, which is more than a month of war at that time. That's one thing. But the second thing is the Israeli army that attacked Lebanon in 2006 was a fresh army. The Israeli army that's attacking Lebanon now is an army that's had already a year of war and a year of unsuccessful war, at least on the ground. Again, pulverization from the air that's what they are, the masters of that, because no moral restraint holds them back. They will bomb children and babies and kindergartens and schools and hospitals and infrastructure and houses. Nothing. There's not like they are in that sense. They are sort of unique in the world today for their capacity to inflict massive damage and their lack of moral restraint in so doing. But on the ground, which is what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, on the ground, the Israeli army that's attacking Lebanon now is it's exhausted. I mean, they themselves keep saying that. They're desperate for more. Yeah, go on.
But he also said that in fact the Israelis have, unlike in 2006, they have mapped out Hezbollah's entire network. They've destroyed. Of course, they assassinated Hassan Nasrallah. They have assassinated any number of leaders of the Hizb across Lebanon. They have destroyed, according to what Elijah was saying, they have obviously destroyed Hezbollah's longer range missiles because
It's
the
not obvious.
equation.
We don't know yet what's going on
Well,
there.
sorry, I mean the point is, as Karim was saying before, the whole point of deterrence is that they've broken the deterrence equation because they're bombing the hell out of Beirut, and the Hezb is not able to do anything equivalent, not even equivalent, or anything even symbolically equivalent to in terms of bombing Tel Aviv. Correct? There's nothing of the sort, and so and if now is not the time, when is the time? I mean, when it's an existential battle on the ground. Do you see what I'm saying? So it seems that's what he seems to be saying, and he seems to say that Hezb we understood what he said that in the last 24 hours only, the Hezbollah finally figured out what it is that had. I'm not sure what he was referring to or alluding to. They said that the last 24 hours they finally figured out where the source of whatever of the breach is. But I'm not sure what he meant by that. It's not clear.
I don't know, Karim, do you want to weigh in on this? Because it seems to me that there's two separate issues. There's the on the ground in the south, and then there's which involves army ground units primarily, and then there's the massive Israeli destruction, and then there's the question of why Hezbollah, having promised all these years the deterrence of, as Nasrallah said, if you bomb Beirut, we're going to bomb Tel Aviv. This tit for tat, which obviously hasn't yet been activated. So the question is, why has it not been activated? One possibility is we believe the Israeli narrative that they destroyed Hezbollah's missile stockpiles. Could be. I mean, I personally don't believe anything the Israelis say, which doesn't mean it's not true. Just means I don't know. I mean, we have this, it's possible. But it could also be that the Israelis have so far successfully kind of put so much pressure on the leadership that the people who run the heavy missile batteries, which are not at the front line, are not willing to start using them until it's clear what the leadership wants them to do, because that's a big strategic decision. So in other words, the tactical questions in the south, fighting on the ground, is one thing, and the larger strategic imperatives of to use or not to use the heavy missiles seems to be another thing. And the latter definitely seems to be disrupted, whether because the missiles are gone or under enough pressure, or because the leadership hasn't yet gotten its act together, and in the meantime they're not going to fire them until there's a decision to do so. I don't know. I mean, none of us have any access to anything. We're not privy to any particular information. We're just going on what's available in the public media and so on. Karim, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think you've just laid out both issues very clearly. I mean, I'm not sure I have very much to add to that, because those are the scenarios, and we simply don't have the information. Nobody does. Neither Elijah nor anyone else has this information. So we don't know. I mean, we're only going to know, unfortunately, at the end, sort of, at the end, and we're going to look back and say, oh yeah, they had it or they didn't have it. As you were laying it out, I think if they were able to deploy it, they would have at this point. I'm not sure that allowing 1 million displaced, allowing Beirut to be utterly destroyed, even with their own constituents, their own people, that they would allow that to happen and sort of still withhold the biggest of weapons that they have. So yeah, it's possible, as you're saying, that the Israeli tactical wins in terms of destroying the leaderships from Nasrallah down does mean that maybe, since these things are not located right on the border, it does mean that the kind of strategic decision to use them or not has not yet been taken. But I don't think so. But we don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. We have no idea. But what I would say, what is troubling for me, and the reason I've become a little bit more pessimistic, is not so much the fighting in the south. I think, as you said, as Elijah said, as we know from 2006 and onwards, these main kind of Hezbollah fighting units, the Radwan and others, will stand their ground. They'll be very effective in a defensive kind of way. In other words, when the Israelis want to enter into the south, they'll more than meet their match on the ground. The problem with that is that in terms of the larger war, since this is not just a sort of, the question is not just a question of invasion. The question is the totality of it. The Hezbollah, part of its deterrence was being able to hit the Israelis and potentially even going on the offensive, going in. The things we used to hear about for many years, which is, okay, we're going to go into the Galilee, we're going to invade, we're going to go inside, we're going to have an incursion, go inside and take over settlements, and then it becomes more difficult. This kind of thing. I think this is the Gaza thing is the issue where having the military surrounded, as Elijah was telling us, to have the military kind of surrounded in the kind of main units in the south, while at the same time, encircling them, coming in from the areas Elijah was talking about, encircling them, and then they could just spend Mittel Gaza. They can just spend 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, to kind of just surround and keep on fighting there for as long as it takes, and nobody's going to care. Even in Beirut, I mean, you have the potential of various politicians and others who would be perfectly happy to sign treaties if it comes down to it, and say, okay, the South is a different world. Let them fight as much as they want. We're going to deal with these other things. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think if they do cut off the South, then they can just encircle it, and Hezbollah guys on the ground can keep fighting and resistance and even being effective, but it'll just be encircled in that sense and without the capabilities to break outside that circle, especially if the border with Syria is shut as well. So that's my concern. And Elijah's back, so maybe he can also kind of shed more light on this idea, Elijah, that you mentioned before. You had to leave and come back now, but this idea of the Israelis kind of coming in, let's say from the east, from the north and the east, coming in and encircling the south. From what I'm understanding, and this is sort of my own thinking from before, which is that if they, let's say it's successful, let's say they're able to, I'm not saying they will, but let's say they're able to somehow do that and effectively cut off the south. Once they cut off the south, then they will just destroy as much of the south as needed, even if they can't get to every single unit, every single military installation, every single Hezbollah fighter. I mean, as you're saying, those guys are going to keep fighting. They're going to fight until every single one of them dies. There's no question about it. And maybe they won't even all die. Maybe they'll still be effective, but they'll be increasingly constrained if we follow the Gaza model, which is if the Israelis are given as much time as they need. So part of this is a time issue, right? I mean, if the Americans or whatever come in and say, okay, that's it, you got 2 more days to finish, then the South is not going to be taken. But if they're given another year, then it's a different issue, right? So my question is, do you see any restraint? I mean, are we talking about US elections? Are we talking, where is the restraint going to come from? That's my question. Where's the time going to stop?
Yeah. So first, let us go to another scenario. I'm sorry if I gave an impression that there are no hopes for the Lebanese resistance against the invader, which is not the case. Now, I'm going to give you another scenario because I think your question is very legitimate. And I've asked this question today and yesterday to people who have more knowledge than me of what's happening to the units who are deployed in the south of Lebanon. And the answer was, imagine Israel so far has damaged Hezbollah and turned it from being 20 times stronger than 2006 to the same force as 2006. Let's consider the worst case scenario. In 2006, Israel did not manage to go through. So, why are you concerned about today when the supply line has never been shut down, even in 2006, when Israel had a complete dominance of the air and stopped anything coming from Syria? Yet the Cornet laser anti tank missiles crossed Syria in the middle of the 2006 war and went to Wadi Suluki under bombardment, under the control of the Israelis, the advance of the Israelis, and defeated the Merkava, and that is known since as the Merkava graveyard. So I don't think there are roads that are fully cut in Lebanon anywhere. During 1982, when I was covering the Israeli invasion, the Israelis used to receive money and allow people to smuggle all the food and the vegetables when Beirut was totally surrounded. In other places, in Bosnia, for example, in Sarajevo, I covered this war and I was surrounded with all the inhabitants, and the food and the supply line was going through the Serbs, which were surrounding the city. So there is nothing that is closed. The Palestinians in the West Bank are receiving weapons, not out of the sky, are receiving it because there's someone selling it among the Israelis. Of every time we hear that there's a depot where the content has been completely missing for a reason. So there are always ways, particularly when you own the ground, when you know every tree, when you know every cave, when you know every side street or every corner. This is not difficult for Hezbollah to bring in all the missiles they need, in particular with this dedication from Iran, from Sayyid Ali Khamenei. And I need to explain that to you, if I may, and when you allow me to, if you want me to. What is the Iranian role here?
Elijah, yes, but let's just give us, if you have a couple of minutes, just quickly, just to wrap up this thing about the front and the south. One question is, if we can agree that Hezbollah can hold the ground in the south because compared to 2006, it's at least stronger, if not, if not many more, many times stronger than it was in 2006. The Israeli army that attacked Lebanon in 2006 was a fresh army. This army has been fighting for a year and has suffered severe setbacks in Gaza, at least on the ground, if nothing else, right? But so we're in this conversation, we're kind of separating the fighting on the ground, on the front lines, however they're defined, as opposed to the bombardment from the air. And that's, I think, what Kareem's question was, that the Israelis seem, as far as we can tell, there is no restraint. They will bomb anything and everything, and the world is not going to intervene to stop them from bombing. So how do we separate the bombardment on the one hand of Beirut and other places throughout the south from the fighting on the ground in the south? Or do you see what I'm saying? Like, what is the equation there? And then we can turn to Iran afterwards. Or Kareem,
So
yeah.
just to clarify that a bit more, which is, are these two different battles? Are they connected, or are these two different battles? I think this is the question a lot of us are asking. Can the battles continue in the south, but somehow it's lost in Beirut, or does the south have to be taken in order for there to be, do you see what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
maybe if you can help us on
Yeah.
that.
So first of all, what's happening now in the south is every time there are severe casualties among the invaders, the Israelis are bombing 4 or 5 buildings in Beirut. They want the cost of the reconstruction to go higher and higher so that the community in Lebanon turned against Hezbollah. This is something they've used in Gaza and it has failed. And in Lebanon, the Lebanese have already a similar experience in 2006. I myself saw in 2006, I went to Dahi when the same day of the ceasefire, because I was in Jammus area, and the day that they said the ceasefire, I came out and I saw people tearing pictures of Hezbollah. But the next day, Hezbollah leaders, Said Hassan Nasrallah, came out and said, I will reconstruct everything. And they believed him, and he did. And he was truthful. And before he was assassinated, he said, I will reconstruct everything. Now, this is where Iran's can end, but I will finish this point. So the Israelis did a favor to Hezbollah by asking all the inhabitants of the south to leave. And then they threaten everybody in Dahi to leave. Therefore, the only concern of Hezbollah today are the internally displaced, what to do with them, how to look after them. And there are already committee working on that because that is their job. But leaving, not having civilians in the battlefield, it's an advantage of the resistance also, because they don't have people to be concerned about, as the damage will be reconstructed, but the maximum damage they can inflict on the enemy while advancing, that's a bonus for them because they know they're not going to kill any Lebanese in a way. And why I am going always toward Iran is because listen to the Sayyid Ali Khamenei today on Friday, what he said. And before I go to what he said, I'm going to say something else about Hezbollah. On the 8th of October, Hezbollah started a war in support of Gaza. The war started only attacking locations that are considered Lebanese territory. So Hezbollah did not attack anything that was not part of the 1701 that Hezbollah agrees on, as long as Israel respects the end of the deal. And the Israelis want only one part of the deal to be respected. Now, Hezbollah will never start a war on its own at the decision of a Secretary General because there is an ideology behind Hezbollah, and that is called Wilayat al-Faqih. And because there is a Wilayat al-Faqih, as on the religious approach, a religious leader needs the highest power and authority to authorize this kind of support because someone religiously needs to be responsible for all the souls that are going to be killed in the battlefield and also for all the reconstruction and the damage that will come with it. Therefore, the approval has been given with the agreement of Iran to accept the idea that Hezbollah would support and accept all the consequences on the religious leader that, according to Article 110 of the Iranian Constitution, Para 4 and 5, has the right to declare peace and war and is the absolute commander of the armed forces and the IRGC. Therefore, he has committed himself and the country to support Hezbollah and to support the reconstruction of Lebanon. His speech today in Arabic, part of it, and for the first time in 5 years, and the visit of Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, to Lebanon, expressing the commitment of Iran toward the people of Lebanon. It is renewing the commitment that Sayyid Ali Khamenei gave to Sayyid Nasrallah on the 8th of October, which means Iran is fully part of this war and its consequences.
Uh,
Yeah, go
Elijah, can I interrupt just very quickly? What specifically, what does this support mean? So one can have political support, one can have moral support, one can have humanitarian support, one can have diplomatic support, one can have rhetorical discursive support. Is there in this specific thing not just a question of supplying weapons? Will Iran engage, or does it not still not need to engage? Is that the point, in the sense that the South, which is where that fighting takes place, they don't need that kind of engagement at this point? So more outside of rhetoric and moral and political support, concretely, what are we talking about here?
Okay, that's a fair question. And I'm going to go to another event, but I will come back to this. Sayyid Ali Khamenei said that he will support the Lebanese and the Shia. He did not stop on the Lebanese. Why he said that? In 2016, Haj Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian brigadier general, went up to Russia and he said, if you are not going to help us to go to Nubul and Zahra, we're going to bring forces from Iran. And they are villages, Shia villages in Syria. The Iranians went to Iraq to support the Kurds, the Christian, the Shia, and the Sunni against ISIS, because for them, the defeat of the Shia in Mesopotamia or in the Levant or in Jabal Amil is a red line for many reasons, not only from the ideological approach, because the Lebanese don't know what to do with the political support or moral support or at the United Nations, because that is not going to help them to survive and to defeat the invader. Absolutely not. But the mere fact that there are Iranian generals who are working alongside with Hezbollah, who came to Lebanon and are working to conduct the operation, where they have unlimited support from Iran because of one reason. If Hezbollah is defeated today, next target is Syria, and nothing stops Benjamin Netanyahu from bombarding Damascus and killing President Assad. And the third target is Iraq. Sanctions on the economy, deja vu. They've tried that, the Iraqis. They turned people against them, and a warning was sent to the Prime Minister Sudani. If you continue supporting Iran and sending our cash dollars to Iran, then you will suffer economically, and the dinar was devaluated. And after a few weeks, the Iraqis learned the lesson and they stopped. Easy to isolate Iraq. But then Iran doesn't have any more allies. And the fourth target is Iran. So is Iran going to support anyone who is attacking Israel today and be engaged in a war the moment that it sees its enemy um, uh, coming forward, advancing, and its allies defeated? It's a question of time for Israel to wage war on Iran when its allies are still powerful or when allies are defeated. Today, Benjamin Netanyahu is self-proclaimed the King David, the leader of the Middle East. He said it. He said he wants to reshape the Middle East. So he is setting the bar very high. I understand that. Nevertheless, his work is to achieve an objective to defeat Hezbollah and to move toward Lebanon if he can and occupy it. And he will if he's not stopped. And from Iranian perspective, it's better to fight the enemy on other territory rather than on fighting him on Iranian territory. Is that
So Elijah, on that point, Elijah, why then did the Hizb wait so long, all these months, to be basically? You're saying they were basically strategically degraded in the sense of the missiles being destroyed, the leadership being killed, and in Iran, they've waited as well for months and months, and the initiative seems to have passed to the Israelis, and there's nothing to restrain the Israelis right now. So one question is why? I mean, so you keep saying that they want to hold on to these allies; these are key allies, and yet they have had strategic patience. They have waited and waited and waited, and the initiative has passed to the Israelis, who've basically gone on the rampage, and nothing seems to deter the Israelis at this point. So there's a couple of questions we have. One is, why do the Hezbollah leadership in the Dahi stay in the Dahi, to the best of your knowledge? I mean, of course, I know that you're not in Hezbollah as such, but they seem to be. There's nowhere for them to escape. There's nowhere for them to go. They're they don't leave. They're always being targeted, and there's no response. That's question number one. Why stay in the Dahi? And the question number two, you had said something earlier. I don't know if we misunderstood you. You said that only in the last 24 hours have Hezbollah understood what the issue is, where the problem is, the leak or something. I'm not sure if that's what you were alluding to earlier. That only in the last 24 hours have they figured out where the problem is that's leading the Israelis to target them so effectively. Did we misunderstand you? Is that what you suggested, or was that not what you suggested?
so? On the first point, I think I've heard this question for a million times now. Why Hezbollah did not start when Mohammed Deif invited them on the 7th of October to be engaged in a full out war as Hamas wanted, and they waited until today. There's a huge difference between what happened on the 7th of October when Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, received all the support in the world. All the leaders around the world came to tell him it is your duty to eradicate Hamas. It is not, you don't have only our support. The Americans thought that it is a coalition of forces, including Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, who are going to start attacking Israel with the objective to eliminate Israel, which was not the case. It took some time for the American forces and their NATO allies to pull out of the region and de escalate and understand that it's a question between the Palestinian people that's been going on for the last 78 years and the Israelis who want to grab the entire territory. And that is the reason. When there was a meeting between Said Nasrallah and Saleh al Aruri before Nasrallah was assassinated, it was the same request. And Said Nasrallah asked al Aruri a question. If we start a full out war on the Lebanese borders, will the Israelis stop their war on Gaza? And al Aruri said, no, they will not. He said, then we can help the Palestinian people better if we attract their part of their effectives, and we don't give the impression that we are all united and we want to exterminate Israel, because then there will not be one single soul on earth that will not support Israel. And the Palestinian cause has gathered in the last almost 12 months a lot of support from the people around the world who accepted to lose their state at university, jobs. We all suffered from it, from our position next to the Palestinian people, because it's a question of justice against injustice. It is not the question if you support one side or you are against another side. It's a question, are you with Israel, a criminal entity that is considered by the International Criminal Court as a war criminal? I'm talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, and you have Gallant, the defense minister, and by the International Court of Justice saying they should stop their occupation. And then by the United Nations Secretary General saying that this conflict did not start yesterday, it started 50 years ago, and it was a bit off the time because it started 78 years ago. But or to start a war and saying, oh, Iran and its allies are attacking Israel and they want to exterminate the Jews as the second Holocaust after 1945. That was a different. And this is why Hezbollah waited, knowing that the time will come for them, and maybe Benjamin Netanyahu will enlarge the battle. But Hezbollah was counting on its effective and its missiles and its special forces. Now, how Hezbollah discovered what's happening is through communication. We're not talking about the pager. We're not talking about the ICOM V84. We're not talking about the mobile phone, because the Israelis directed everybody toward not using the mobile phone because this is the most dangerous tool. And the pager has been tampered with and sabotaged with the pager. Therefore, Hezbollah was using the landline. My question is, and here I stop, was the landline, the private landline, safe?
So, what other form of communication could there be? I mean, how does one communicate if you can't use landlines and you can't use any other kind of communication? How does that work? How are there other modes of, I don't know. I'm not a military guy, so are there other modes of communication that we don't know about that can be effective, so that they're not gathering in little rooms all together, so that the Israelis come in and blow everybody up in one room? Is that why they're all coming together? Yeah.
Forget about all the compromise system and start a new one. And I think this is what Hezbollah is doing now, learning the lesson.
Can they do this now?
Oh, yeah,
In the middle of the war, can they can do that now?
but they've done that before. And this is where you learn the lesson and then you understand where are the mistakes, to learn from these mistakes and then continue. Killing, you see, non state actors have horizontal leadership, they don't have perpendicular leadership. Therefore, you remove one, there are hundreds in the line. You remove a secretary general and you kill the second one, you will have a council of the shura. This is how Hezbollah has always been. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was appointed a secretary general as long as he lived after 2006. Before that, there was a shura council that remained, but with more power to Sayyid Nasrallah after 2006. And now they can revert to the shura council, and then that's it. And one person, the Shura Council, is like the example I gave to a general in the Lebanese army who called me the other day and he had the same concern. And I said, well, if you have a brigadier general out of the 5 or 6 you have at the Ministry of Defense is killed or died, I said, how many would replace him? He said, around 400. And I said, if you have a general killed, he said, you have 5,000 colonels that want to replace him. But that's the same answer. Hezbollah is an organized, irregular army.
Yes, except Elijah, that they're I mean, presumably all their fortifications in the Dahi, insofar as their shelters in the Dahi for the leadership, have been compromised. I mean, did the Hizb not predict that the U.S. or that the Israelis had these bunker busting bombs of the depth, or is it something that we have never seen before? This kind of usage of these bombs to this extent.
No, I,
What is it about? Because presumably they had planned the idea that the Israelis would bomb in the event of
I
war.
don't think they understood that these places were compromised. Otherwise, they would not go to these places. And they were compromised. And it's easy to understand the chain of command and where every unit is and where the house of every member of the unit. What they need to do, and they have learned this lesson, and this is what they're doing now, is to do exactly like Hamas. They have to go under the ground. And as Sinwar, after 12 months, Israel is not managing to find him. Otherwise, they will kill him. And the Israelis are very theatrical. And they say, we've killed the person who launched that particular missile or that particular bomb. And they know that this is not the end of the game, but they like to say it. And this is why they want to kill Sinwar and they can't find him. So Hezbollah has learned the lesson. Like the Fadi 1, 2, 3, and 4, the Israelis cannot reach them because they are in mountains, in caves, under the ground. They have full facilities, fully protected. Not even Buster bomb can destroy them. And this is where the leadership has to go.
Elijah, if I may, on that, actually, to connect these different dots now, let's go with the hypothesis that the big missiles, are actually still largely secure because, as you're saying, they are in deep tunnels, 70 meters, 90 meters deep, that to which no bunker
The
buster
middle,
could
the
still
middle,
get,
the middle range,
especially
not the long range.
okay, the middle range, but still heavy, heavy rockets compared to Katyushas and so on. So, could it be that the reason we're not seeing the deployment of these rockets is the fact that Hezbollah is still getting its leadership act together? They figured out how to communicate. Maybe now the form of communication they need to turn to is literally sending messengers back and forth, because that is more, relatively more secure than using a, form of communication. I mean, like an electronic form of communication. Could it be that that's what it is? In other words, that fighting on the ground at the tactical level is one thing. A strategic decision to use heavy missiles requires leadership coordination, which isn't happening because the leadership is getting its act together, either by replacing cells, as you're saying, or because the whole question of communication of where to what tunnel to go in and so forth is still being organized. Do you see what I'm saying? Separating the strategic from the tactical in that sense. Does that make sense?
It makes sense when you presume that the leadership has been wiped out, which is not the case. Secondly, Hezbollah would not wait until the first 10 missiles arrive and then they will retaliate. They need to have a good storage where they presume always that they won't have more. And for that, I don't think this is not happening now. I think it's starting to happen. And this is one of the promises that the Iranians have given to support the Lebanese resistance is to continue this supply line that is not going to stop. The Israelis will keep monitoring them, and the Iranians will keep trying, and the Syrian will keep trying, and the Iraqi will keep trying. And those who have been damaged by losing a hand or eyesight, one or two, have been replaced by the special forces, because the special forces can do all this job in all the specialized unit. And I don't think the allies in Iraq and Yemen who have the specialty in using long range missiles would be excluded to say, or too ambitious to say, they will not come to Lebanon. I think they will, because not in large number, but only those with speciality in particular domain. And Hezbollah has received a hit and is waking up. We see, as you have mentioned earlier, the attack against the Israeli special forces that are trying to create a safe place for the tanks to move in, and they're not managing because they don't have yet the clear area. The moment we see the tanks moving in and going to strategic hills, we have a second question: can they stay? For how long? Are they going to be bombarded or not? We're still at the beginning of the war. So no despair, but no raise of expectation too high.
Elijah, do you have a few more minutes to stay with us? I want to ask
Until
about.
they call me, I'm all yours.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask about the larger question of Iran. So not so much Iranian support, specifically to Hezbollah, but a few days ago we saw this very dramatic Iranian attack into Israel that, by all accounts, seems to have been quite effective, much more so than the Israelis are letting on. Not nothing huge, but they hit certain bases, they hit certain runways, certain strategic parts of the Israelis, and sent a warning that if the Israelis were to attack in a more significant way, that they are certainly able to get through with their missiles, with the ballistic missiles, and they're able to hit kind of key areas, and they can keep expanding if the Israelis want to expand. How do you see this war? I mean, we hear now. In fact, I think Biden today was asked. You will have seen he was asked by some reporter about, can you contain? Do you think there's going to be an all-out regional war, i.e., with Iran? And he said, "Well, can you predict if it will rain?" That was his answer. And then then he kind of backtracks, says, "Well, we're trying our best. We want to make sure there's no war, etc." But that's still a long way. There's still a lot of things to do before we can say anything about this war. On the other hand, there's a lot of leaks about how there's going to be an Israeli hit, and it's going to be a hard hit, and it may involve American directly. I'm not talking about surveillance or whatever, but sort of direct American attack with the Israelis. What is your assessment about this larger war, in a sense, between Iran directly with the Israelis and the American role in this?
Anything that comes out of the Americans needs to be really considered very carefully. The Americans said we don't want an occupation of Gaza, and Benjamin Netanyahu went and created the Netzarim corridor dividing the north of the south, and he went to occupy the Philadelphia corridor with Egypt, and Americans said no Rafah, and he occupied Rafah, and he sent a complete division when, according to 1978 Camp David Agreement and the 2005 extension, he should not have there a division. Far from it. So, with the support of Egypt and the agreement of Egypt, Benjamin Netanyahu managed to do so. With the screaming of the Americans that are telling us they are screaming, but they have supplied Benjamin Netanyahu with 50,000 tons of explosive. And the only time that Biden withheld 3,200 bombs, he released them after a few weeks. And these 3,200 bombs received the right answer from the Israelis. If you don't deliver us precision bombs, instead of bringing down one building, we will bring 10. So, what the Americans are saying, we really not uh, need to consider it, in particular when there are US elections and the current administration doesn't want to look bad in the eyes of the anti Israeli war of this kind, would like to vote and decide to whom they want to cast their vote. But we keep remembering, and Biden reminds us of that so many times when he said, I'm a Zionist and I don't need to be a Jew. And the objective of the Zionism is to make sure that all of the land of Palestine is controlled by Israel, and there is no talk about two state solutions. Well, there is a lot of talk from the Americans about two state solutions, but no effective doing. So they ask.
Elijah, sorry to interrupt. Can I interrupt you? Sorry, just because, I mean, more specifically about whether you think there'll be an Israeli attack, what kind of Israeli attack there will be on Iran, and will the Americans, not so much what they're talking about, but do you think that they're in a position now where they will join in such an attack if that attack takes place? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean,
Are in since the beginning of this battle. The first thing Biden ordered is to send 2,000 of the Delta forces to support the Israelis. He sent 5 generals with a large experience in insurgency war and in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and all the intelligence support that the UK and US, France, the deployment in the Red Sea, the deployment in the Arab Sea, the deployment in the Mediterranean. Now there are U.S. Naval units protecting the gas rig in the Mediterranean, the Israeli gas rig. The Americans are in it. The interception of all the missiles and the drones fired from Yemen, the interception of more missile and drone from Israel, and attacking Iran may not be an option for the Americans now because they either the administration will leave and then you have a Republican, or Kamala Harris would come and Biden doesn't want to burn her possibility to be re-elected if he declares the support of Israel. He might have said to Benjamin Netanyahu, wait until we finish the election, because the Americans not only have been promising and giving Israel 3.5 billion of Obama's money that he decided to give for 10 years, but he added 27 millions and then again 8.7 billions. So the Americans are in. Israel can never wage war without the support of the Americans, without the ammunition of the Americans, the intelligence. And if you remember, the Americans told Benjamin Netanyahu, don't go to war in Rafah. We will help you to exterminate Hamas. We will offer you intelligence information. Are these not part of this war? They are indeed part of the war. They don't have the name of the Israeli army on them, but they are partners with the Israeli army. So, are they going to go to war against Iran? The answer is yes. But is Iran going to an all out war? Not yet. Hezbollah has not been defeated. Hezbollah is still fighting. Only a few days of the invasion. We have not finished the first week. So why Iran would go to an all-out war when it is healthy it can support Hezbollah even better.
But Elijah, I don't understand when you say the all-out war has already, as you said, has commenced. It's commenced a year ago, and we've seen the demolition, destruction, the no red lines, the destruction of the Hezbollah deterrence, Tel Aviv, Beirut. That's all gone. The assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the assassination of all these leaders. These are all in the end, as you said, there's a relationship between Hezbollah and Iran. If Iran is, what is Iran waiting for? Or, I mean, I guess the Israelis, there's nothing to stop the Israelis from bombing Iran right now, correct? I mean, it's because you said they said they're going to retaliate for the Iranian retaliation. And so, how do you see, Karim is asking, I guess, how do you see that scenario unfolding with an Israeli attack on Iran? What would Iran then do in terms of what are its possibilities, what are its actual abilities to withstand an Israeli attack backed by the Americans, enabled by the Americans, and at the same time, how long does Iran wait in terms of what's going on in Lebanon? Because if they lose Hezbollah, they've lost a major ally and
Well,
card.
Iran will retaliate in kind. So if the Israelis would hit the infrastructure, which I doubt, they can carry out assassination attacks, or they can hit military bases, exactly like Iran did. And then we will be in a tit for tat. But I don't agree with that we are already in all out war. Benjamin Netanyahu cannot sustain several fronts. He has attacked Gaza on his own and played with the front of Lebanon until he made sure that he finished the job in Gaza, even if he did not achieve his objectives. Now he's turning toward Lebanon, where he's collecting everything that he has lost in Gaza, and his popularity has been boosted. Going against Iran now is not in his advantage. He will lose all the accumulated point. What he's doing now is trying to consolidate his position as a leader that is an indispensable leader for the Israeli society. And he would go against Iran only if he manages to defeat Hezbollah. He is also aware, am I going to be able to defeat Hezbollah? And my answer is no, he's not. Why? Because a few days ago, he declared himself as the leader of the Middle East, start talking like Condoleezza Rice in 2006 of a new Middle East. But then after the first Hezbollah hit, he said, I want to release the prisoners from Gaza and I want the return of all the internally displaced Israelis. So he has lowered his objectives. And he can do that all the time depending on the development on the ground. So he doesn't have objectives that are fixed because he doesn't want to compromise of something he will not achieve. And he will see how much damage Hezbollah has received in his hit, and if this damage is confirmed for a very long time, or Hezbollah is going to start bombing other objectives. Because so far, the Israelis are saying, I'm bombing only military objectives. I'm not bombing the civilians. Of course, I bombed Sayyid Nasrallah and killed and wounded 150 people with him, but that's not my fault because he was in a residential area. I bombed today Said Hashim Safieddin. Oh, he was not the target. And then he switched to the intelligence headquarters of Hezbollah. So he finds always an excuse, like he did in the Shifa hospital in Gaza, to find an excuse why he's bombing the hospital, why he's bombing the tent, because they are operative. So we are not yet in an all out war.
Fair enough, Elijah. But I guess the point is that when you talk, and Sadi and I and Karim and I have discussed this many times, but you're the military expert here. Iran as a state, in terms of the weaponry Iran has, how can Iran as a state, given that it's a conventional state, conventional army, how on earth can it possibly, in any all-out war scenario, um, go up against Israel that's backed by the United States, or as you said, Israel and the United States? In the end, the technological gap is massive, is it not? And the military gap is massive, is it not?
In 1982, Hezbollah had nothing. It took Hezbollah 18 years to push the Israelis out of Lebanon in the year 2000. And they started with nothing. And they managed. Hamas started with nothing. They manufacturing their own weapons locally. And today, Israel recognized it cannot defeat Hamas in 364 square kilometers in the biggest open air concentration camp. Israel has many options, but Iran has many US bases around the Middle East, but it's not going to start hitting them because it doesn't want a confrontation with America openly. But it has the Strait of Hormuz, it has the Red Sea, it has the Mediterranean. They can shut down the world economy in at least 40%. Strait of Hormuz is 18 to 20, the Mediterranean, the Red Sea. And then what's going to happen to the world economy? Either everybody starts screaming, stop this war, or let the damage be on everybody. So there are many cards. And Iran has been manufacturing tens of thousands of missiles. In fact, Russia went to Iran for help in drones and missiles because they have realized that nuclear weapons don't help. 5,000 nuclear weapons in Russia. He's not using one, President Putin. But as President Putin in Russia, in Ukraine, overvalued the capacity of the army, I think Said Nasrallah thought that his army had the capability that he did not really value in terms of missile capability, hiding these missiles, and how to protect them, but not in the special forces because he has experience with his special forces in Syria and Iraq, and he believed they can achieve what we call today the impossible.
That might be a good way to end, actually, Elijah, because there's so many pieces.
Osama is still not very convinced, so I'm happy for Osama to challenge me even further. I'm very happy to agree to disagree or to continue this debate, and please don't agree with me.
No, no, it's not about disagreeing with you. It's not. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm listening and learning from you since I'm not a military expert at all. It's just a question of, the issue is you said that Hezbollah had nothing, but my question was about Iran, not about Hezbollah in the sense that Hezbollah was on its own territory, and it became, of course, a liberation movement on its territory, and eventually, as you said, after 18 years, drove the Israelis out. The only time Israel has ever been driven out of any occupied Arab lands by force was through Hezbollah. You're absolutely right, and they worked and worked and worked and invested, etc. We all know the story there. But when it comes to an Iranian-Israeli confrontation, the question is, the Israelis are simply not going to invade Iran. They're just going to bomb and bomb and bomb, and they have unlimited US support, it seems. And you're suggesting that it's not quite unlimited. I mean, on the one hand, you're saying it is unlimited because the US is involved in this war from the beginning. On the other hand, you're saying, but Iran can then damage the oil.
Yeah, but some I
There's
think
something
I
there.
think I'm not going to answer for Elijah. I think part of what Elijah is saying is that the Iranians have also the capacity to hit back and to cause pain as well. So it's a little bit like, I mean, the even if they don't have an air force, as Elijah is saying, they have a massive stock of missiles and rockets
Let me tell you
that can hit
something, if
targets.
I
Not
may
just
here. There is a curse of geography on Iran and Israel. Israel has very small geography. Iran, 1.7 million square kilometers. We're talking about a continent, vast, and Israel is very small. Look at the missile that Iran used. The first time they've used a slow drone, they used old missiles, but they used 8 modern missiles, and all 8 hit the Israeli military base in Negev. They used the only advanced missile against this objective, saying that objective is where your air force bombed our consulate in Damascus. Now, when you deploy a liquid fuel missile, you need hours before you launch it. It needs time before it is launched. What the Iranian did is they wanted to send a message. Don't mess with us. We're going to respond. But what happened in the last days is completely different. First, they used a solid fuel missile, which needs only 3 to 4 minutes to be deployed and fired. Secondly, they used hypersonic missiles. And people argue that all missiles are hypersonic. No, they all cross the 5 Mach, the barrier of sound, when they go outside the atmospheric pressure, but they do not sustain the same speed. While hypersonic missiles, they go between 15 to 12, and they maintain the speed throughout the hit. 7 minutes from Iran to Israel to hit Israel. No need to fuel your air force in the air or carry limited missiles. No, they've sent 200 missiles. Out of the 200, we have seen very little intercepted on videos. We don't need to listen to the Iranian or to the Israelis. The videos are there. Only very few interception missile. Why? Because the Iranian wanted to surprise them, wanted to say, we're going to hit you and we're going to hit you hard. But they kept away from the infrastructure, the civilian infrastructure, and the civilians, because the message was very clear. I advise everyone to watch the video and to see how Iran created three corridors where all the missiles came through one corridor, through second corridor, and through the third, north, south, and the middle. Why? No interception missile on Earth can stop a series of missiles coming from one direction and in this quantity. So the intention is to show capability, skill, and type of missile they have, knowledge of the locations, and the capability to hit these locations, and determination to hit Israel, regardless the consequences. They knew the Israelis 90% are going to retaliate. They're ready for it, but they're not looking for an all-out war. They don't want that. They want to continue supporting the resistance, and for that they need to remain healthy. If they declare war, they need all the missiles they have.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Elijah. The other thing that the Iranians did is they showed that there is no defense against these hypersonic and other, most of the other missiles too. There's nothing the Israelis can do. So rationally, if the Israelis are rational, which is an open question, I'm not sure that they are, but insofar as they're rational, their rational calculation now should be, let's not hit these people because they can hit us back. And as you're saying, in terms of geographical scale, Iran is gigantic, and Palestine is a very, very small place. So it seems in Israel's own interest, the logic would be don't attack Iran, or maybe do a symbolic thing like they did in April, rather than a much heavier kind of assault. Right? That's it seems to be in a way the deterrence would hold in that case if the Israelis are rational. The question is, are the Israelis rational? And in particular, is Netanyahu rational? It seems to me that they're not. And he, especially he, but they collectively are also. I don't think that they think in rational terms because they have been enabled by the West for so long to do whatever they want with total impunity. Why be reasonable? Why be
I'll
rational?
answer this question. For
Can I just add, Elijah? Can I just add something on that? Just to add something very quickly on what Sadi's saying. I think what's interesting about this is that do the Israelis see this opportunity, or do certain parts of the Israelis, Netanyahu obviously, but some of the others around him, with some of the Americans, see this opportunity, knowing that this is a chance to possibly really degrade Iran through all what they see as proxies, and they're not real proxies, but as far as they're concerned, proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, etc., and then to really weaken Iran to the extent that then they have to deal with them in a much weaker way. And this is their opportunity. They won't be able to have it next time and the time after that, and time after that. And does that then therefore change the calculation, the strategic calculation?
I think they're not aware and they can't have a full picture of the damage they can suffer from attacking Iran directly. And to answer the first part of the question, we all, and myself first, made a mistake of evaluating Benjamin Netanyahu. He changed radically. He behaved since the 7th of October like a person we've never known before. So everything that he did was unpredictable. Every single move. And he is so skillful, and he is such a good, he had such a good mind. And of course, a very criminal mind, but an intelligent mind. On the 7th of October, he had the lowest marks in the Knesset, the lowest in the street. He was indicated as the responsible for everything that happened to the Israelis, the lack of security. And then what he did, he brought in Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, highly considered, and he took their support. I'm sorry, I have to go. Yeah? How much time do I have? No. Sorry. Thank you ever so much. Okay, right.
On the one hand, if just to summarize for our viewers and listeners, seriously, on the one hand, he began by saying, giving a rather bleak picture of the situation on the ground in Lebanon. Kenny, I don't know if you were here for that, but he said basically the Israeli plan is to come in via the usba, the finger that goes into Palestine, cut across the Litani and isolate the Hizb, and then just take its time pulverizing. Doesn't matter how many losses it takes. His argument was they would succeed in doing that because they would have cut the Hizb in half. Basically, that was his argument, and that we shouldn't underestimate the Israeli capacity and determination to do this, no matter how many casualties they take. That was part of his argument. Right? That's how he began, Sadi. Did he not say that?
Yeah,
And then
that's
there's the question. And then he also said, hang on, but he also said, if I may, he also said that the Hizb's long-range missiles, and Sadi, he insisted on this, have been destroyed. I mean, he said it. He said it straight out. He said it several times.
I think he said that
He
we
did.
don't know. That
Some
it's
we don't
likely
know.
that
No,
we
no.
don't
He
know.
said earlier.
That we don't.
No, of
He
course
said
we
it's
don't know.
likely.
We
It's
don't know
very
anything.
likely.
Yeah, okay. So we don't know anything. Obviously, we're just academics sitting, doing our
No, because
podcast.
but there was actually he said two different versions. I mean, on the one hand, he said they were all destroyed. On the other hand, he said that the medium range missiles are all in these deep shelters that are 70 meters deep.
Yes, but the medium range missiles are not the ones that actually reach Tel Aviv, correct?
No, they are the medium range. Some of Tel Aviv is not that far.
Oh, I thought he
Yes, they
said.
can.
I thought his whole argument was that the long range ones are the ones that have all been degraded or destroyed.
The fact is, neither he nor we nor anybody really
Yeah, but
knows what's going on.
But they haven't used them. My point is they haven't used them.
So we go back to what we're doing. What we did in this episode is go through various scenarios, all of which are plausible, and and they range from the I mean, none of them are particularly good, but they're all there's a range of them. I still think if it from what I can see personally, based partly on what he's saying, but also just on my own reading of the situation, it seems to me I don't think the Israeli army can defeat Hezbollah on the ground. I don't think it's possible. They haven't been able to defeat Hamas in a year of absolute brutal, no holds barred assault over a tiny Gaza. Don't forget, it's 300 square kilometers. It's tiny. It's been under siege for all of these years and so forth. Lebanon is all, you guys know, southern Lebanon. It is the perfect place to fight a guerrilla war. Yes,
Sari, I think now we're going a little bit in circles. I think we've laid out the scenarios. I'm not sure there's that much more to say in the sense of no, but just because we don't know. The question that I think that you were asking before, and I'm not sure was answered, which is, and I think I asked it as well, which is, I agree with you. I don't think that they're going to lose in the south. I just don't think so. I think the Hezbollah is
you
extremely
mean
strong.
Hezbollah?
Hezbollah is very, very strong. They're going to fight to the last person. They've trained their entire lives for this moment. They have on
But
top
also,
of everything else.
and not just that. Sorry, if I could also add this: the Israeli army has proved itself to be an extremely ineffective,
not
fighting
effective,
force.
cowardly
Look
as
at
well as
Gaza.
cowardly. Once it gets on the ground, they're quite
useless,
cowardly.
ill-disciplined, frazzled, fighting on the ground. That's not what they do.
But the question is that fight in the south separate from the other things that are taking place? In other words, the question that it came up one point, if they get encircled in the south, and you just have this war of attrition which continues for weeks and months. I don't see. I mean, if the so-called international community allowed Gaza the genocide, like full-on genocide, full-on genocide with civilians displaced, with
That's
nowhere
the
to go.
word.
I mean, at least Lebanese displaced have, it's terrible, but they've got some places to go. At some level. In Gaza, they didn't. So if they're allowed to go on for another weeks and months and months and months, and the south is encircled and pummeled from above and utterly destroyed. That's the question. That's what I was asking about time scale. I was asking about, is it separate? Is the battle in the south what determines everything, or is the war of attrition good enough for the Israelis if they're destroying everything else in between and getting the civilian population, both the Shia as the displaced, absolutely demoralized, and of course in desperate condition, and on the other hand, the other non-Shia population in Lebanon, to get them more and more, to get the sectarian stuff. So far, that hasn't happened. So far, there's been a lot of solidarity. I'm not talking about Twitter and social media and some of these, right-wing politicians who are spewing their poison. On the ground, there's been a lot of solidarity, and how long will that continue?
My worry is that I'm not worried about the front on the south, because I don't think, as I said, I don't think the Israelis are capable of winning that war on the ground. But as the experience of the past year has shown us, they can go on bombing and bombing and bombing. They could destroy every building in Beirut.
Are they separate battles or
Yeah,
not? That's
in
my
a sense, in the sense that they may make up for their lack of ability on the ground with more and more bombardment from the air, because that's unlimited, basically. Because the I was going to use an expletive here. I won't. The United States of America will go on sending 2 and 3 and 4,000 pound bombs. Right. I read a statistic the other day based on an American assessment after the Gulf War. It's actually kind of a stunning number. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. One sec. It is here. During the Gulf War, the 2003, the second invasion of Iraq in 2003. According to a U.S. Air Force Central Command report on the 2003 invasion of Iraq, U.S. Air Force has expended a total of 24 GBU-24 and GBU-28, 2 and 4,000 pound bunker busters bombs in the entire conflict against Iraq. So in America, in its entire war against Iraq, which is a country 2 or 3,000 times, I don't know, it's much bigger than Lebanon for sure. They used 28 bombs. The Israelis used double that number in a couple of hours when they bombed Nasrallah, and again they did it again in the bombing the other
meaning
day.
what?
So
Meaning what?
they are operating. The thing about
Meaning that the military-industrial complex is making a ton of money, and the U.S. is supplying Israel with tons of weapons, and there's no restraint, and the Israelis are
there's
totally
no
unrestrained.
restraint. The Israelis they're unlike the Americans. I mean, it's amazing to think that the U.S. is so restrained given how much harm it's done around the world, from Vietnam to Afghanistan. But the U.S. is the U.S. does seem to operate by some kind of standard operating procedure. They don't just bomb randomly. The Israelis will bomb everything and anything.
I'm not
And
sure
there's
Iraq.
nothing.
I'm not sure they didn't bomb randomly in places like Iraq and Fallujah
I
and
mean,
places
maybe they
like
did,
this.
but not as I said. 28 of these.
Yeah,
Come
no,
on.
I agree. Say, I mean, the point you made is come across that the Israelis have dropped more of these bunker buster bombs in Lebanon in a tiny space, right, than the U.S. did in 2003. But in the end, these
In
are
1 hour.
in 1 hour exactly. But these are ultimately, I mean, it's an interesting statistic. But I think in the end, I think the fundamental question is, ultimately what's still confusing to me is the whole, and the question, Kenny, and the one that you posed, which is the strategic, bigger question. If Hezbollah is, because on the one hand he's saying there's a possibility that Hezbollah he says it's possible initially, it may be destroyed. On the other hand, he said Iran does not want that and will not allow that. Given that, what are the parameters that are going to play out? That's really the big question. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's it. We have to wait and see. We have to wait and see.
Guys, I think we need to wrap here. It's been a long episode. I think there's a lot of questions. Unfortunately, I think this war is going to go on for a while. In Lebanon, of course, in Gaza, and all these places, West Bank. We have to get back to talking about the West Bank as well, because it's unbelievable what's going on there as well. And the Lebanon war is, as Elijah is saying, I think it's still at the beginning, and it's going to go for a long time. And Beirut, I fear Beirut is going to be just pulverized more and more in the way that Gaza did. Now they've started with the so-called military things. Now they've expanded to the healthcare facilities, the hospital areas, the cemeteries, this kind of thing. They're still
For
saying
them,
these are all
everything. They
Hezbollah.
say
Then it's going,
everything. It's all
yeah, but
Hezbollah, right?
so it's going to go in the Gaza way. It's going to grow,
And of course, their friends of
as
the Western press immediately say, "Has the
yeah,
Israeli
it is
Hezbollah war, Israel's
Hezbollah
breaks,
control,
Hezbollah
Hezbollah
strongholds,
control
Karim,
blah
that.
blah
Karim,
blah."
Karim, since you're in France, where's Mother France in all this?
Mother France is a totally useless place with unable to do anything. They once in a while they'll throw support and say we don't want invasion. We're
Maybe
against the
Papa
ground
Macaroon will
invasion.
come and save us. What do you think?
We're for full sovereignty of Lebanon, etc. They've put their initiative. That ceasefire was supposedly French-American ceasefire. So they kind of pop their faces in once in a while. They try to say something, but everybody knows that the role has been totally taken out by the Americans. Totally, 100%. So with that note, yeah, we'll wrap now, and I'm sure we'll continue.